For as long as most species could remember, the Galactic Concord held the stars in its iron grasp. It was not a union of equals, but a hierarchy of control. The Council sat at the top, formed of the most ancient and dominant species in the galaxy, those whose technology, power, and cunning had long eclipsed those beneath them. Below them, the Valkyrie enforced peace, not through diplomacy, but domination. The Valkyrie were not diplomats. They were living weapons, bioforged generations ago to serve the will of the Council. Towering, reptilian, and bred for brutality, they were the reason rebellions never lasted longer than a week. Their warships cast long shadows over the skies of disobedient worlds, and their name alone could silence planetary broadcasts. It was said that once the Valkyrie marked a system for punishment, not even time could erase the scars they left behind. Worlds did not submit because they agreed. They submitted because the alternative was unthinkable. The Concord believed fear was more efficient than loyalty. Why waste time earning trust when a display of force made entire planets behave? Billions lived under this logic, day after day, year after year. In the outer sectors, parents told their children bedtime stories that ended not with monsters, but with the Valkyrie descending from orbit. Compliance became culture. Resistance became myth. And then Earth joined. Humans were late arrivals to the galactic stage. By the time their ships crawled past the Kuiper Belt and slipped into faster-than-light travel, most empires had already carved up the galaxy. Earth offered resources, trade routes, and creative problem-solving. Humans had a way of approaching problems sideways that baffled older species. They were strange, unpredictable, emotional. But they didn't cause trouble. Not at first. The Council viewed them with mild curiosity. The Valkyrie viewed them with mild contempt. Humans were smaller, slower. Their bodies didn't regenerate like Valkyrie tissue, and they didn't possess the natural psionics of the Lissari or the hive-mind intelligence of the XL. They were, at best, considered useful. At worst, ignorable. What the galaxy misunderstood, what they always misunderstood, was Earth's history. They didn't see the scars etched into the species' soul. The millennia of war, revolution, endurance. The chaos they had survived. The terrible peace they had earned. Humanity had not forgotten the lessons of fire. It had simply chosen, for now, not to burn. Earth signed the Concord Accords. Their diplomats smiled. Their merchants thrived. Their colonies quietly expanded. But Earth remembered every insult, every slight, every laugh. And in the far reaches of the Terran Defense Corps, Earth watched, listened, learned. The galaxy thought it had nothing to fear from Earth. And then, one day, on a quiet, dusty colony called Icarian 7, a child refused to kneel. That was the moment the fear began to shift. And deep within the cold, black heart of space, something ancient stirred. Not rage, but resolve. The kind of resolve that only humanity could carry. Because fear may have ruled the stars, but Earth had taught itself to master fear. The mining colony of Icarian 7 floated on the edge of mapped space. Dry, mineral-rich, and mostly overlooked by the wider galaxy. It was a shared venture between several Concord member species, including humans. The colony was quiet, productive, and unremarkable in every way that mattered to the High Council. Until the visit. House Tiverin, one of the noble Valkyrie bloodlines, sent a delegation to inspect the mines. It was meant to be ceremonial, a gesture of dominance masked as diplomacy. Nobles often visited outposts to remind the lower castes, and the newer species, who held power in the stars. They arrived in a sleek cruiser flanked by armed guards, stepping onto the surface like conquering royalty. The human workers had seen these displays before. They lined up politely. They bowed when expected. Most understood the unspoken rule: do not provoke, do not challenge, and above all, do not stand out. Liam Wren didn't understand that rule. He was 10 years old, son of a geologist and a cargo operator. Liam had grown up among rocks, dust, and starlight. His world was small but full of curiosity. He had read about the stars, about the different species, about the history of Earth. What he hadn't read, what no book ever truly explained, was what it meant to be small in the eyes of power. When Lord Varnek's son approached the human children, flanked by 2 Valkyrie guards, the others bowed immediately, all except Liam. He stood still, confused, not defiant. His bright green eyes locked with the nobles in simple, innocent honesty. "You will kneel," the young noble growled, expecting obedience. Liam shook his head. "I don't think I have to." Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Silence followed. Without warning, the noble struck him. The Valkyrie's clawed hand lashed across Liam's face, throwing him to the ground. His head hit the dusty stone. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. But as he sat up, dazed and shivering, crimson tears began to stream from his eyes. The colony medic would later explain it was a genetic condition, an extreme vascular response under sudden stress. Rare, harmless, but on that day, in that moment, the sight of a child bleeding from the eyes was horrifying. Someone filmed it. Of course someone did. A worker, half hidden behind equipment, uploaded the footage to the local network before security could erase it. It spread like wildfire. A human child, trembling, blood on his face, whispering, "You shouldn't have done that." The Valkyrie guards dismissed the incident. The noble's son laughed. The council never noticed the upload, but Earth did. And while the galaxy moved on, Earth's silence began. Not the silence of fear, the silence before a response. The footage reached Earth within 17 hours. At first it was passed from personal inbox to encrypted forums, then to military channels and corporate networks. Most videos from Concord space were routine. Doc logs, export scans, colonial updates. This one was different. No one needed context. The moment the boy looked up with blood running down his cheeks, everyone understood something terrible had happened. The video lasted 13 seconds. It took only 8 to shake the core of humanity. A child. Human. Bleeding. Silent. Defiant. His voice was quiet, but clear. "You shouldn't have done that." By the time Earth's Defense Assembly met behind sealed doors, the footage had already been scrubbed from public Concord channels. The High Council had labeled it unverified colonial propaganda. No official complaint had been filed. No incident recorded. As far as the Concord was concerned, nothing had happened on Icarian 7. But Earth knew better. Within a day, every human diplomat across Concord systems received coded orders. No explanations. No debates. Just 2 words. Return home. Their departures were sudden, polite, and absolute. No ambassador remained behind. Embassies were locked. Comms were cut. Human trade ships docked for resupply vanished into faster-than-light lanes without notice. Concord officials reached out in confusion, then in irritation. Earth responded with silence. At first, the Council was unconcerned. This wasn't the first time a member species had pulled back in protest. Earth would return, eventually. They always did. Humans were passionate but predictable, emotion-driven, soft, diplomatic. The Council didn't believe in their teeth. But something felt different this time. There were no speeches, no protests, no demands for justice. Just silence. On secure Terran networks, the footage had been enhanced, analyzed, dissected. Liam Wren's face became a symbol. His blood, once seen, couldn't be forgotten. Artists recreated the moment in digital murals. Soldiers in the Terran fleet watched it before briefings. Intelligence officers used it in recruitment drives. He was 10, they said. And he stood. The message spread in whispers. One of ours was hurt. The Valkyrie mocked the video publicly. Soft skins cry when scratched, one general said during a broadcast. This is what the Concord protects. They didn't see the shift in Earth's eyes. They didn't notice that Terran Black Ops networks had gone dark. They didn't realize that Earth's quantum comms had stopped pinging Concorde satellites. Then, a single encrypted message was sent from Earth's central diplomatic terminal. It wasn't addressed to any official. It wasn't directed at the Council, but it was received, decoded, and understood. 5 words. Simple, cold, unmistakable. He was 10. We remember. In the vast stillness of space, silence can speak louder than screams. And this silence had teeth. 17 days after the incident on Icarian 7, the stars above the colony rippled. It began with a deep space distortion, a tremor in subspace so sudden. Sensors failed to register it until the fleet had already arrived. Human ships, unlike anything the Concorde had cataloged, emerged in perfect formation. 300 vessels, matte black and unmarked, hovered in silence over Icarian 7. The Valkyrie orbital station sounded a level 4 alert. That alert lasted 12 seconds. Then it went dark. No shots fired. No warning. Just silence. The Concorde scrambled to respond, but the damage had already begun. The ships bore no call signs, no diplomatic IDs, no faction colors. Only one image appeared on their hulls, on every hull. A red-eyed boy, his face streaked with blood, staring forward with unblinking resolve. Liam Wren. The image wasn't large. It wasn't accompanied by slogans or threats. It didn't need to be. Everyone who saw it knew what it meant. The noble house that ruled Icarian 7, House Tuverin, had been mourned. Human communication was clear, surgical, and brief. They had 20 minutes to evacuate the civilian population. No retaliation would follow if they complied. The noble's son, the one who struck the boy, was not offered the same option. He never made it off-world. In precisely 21 minutes, Earth struck. The palace compound, built into the cliffs of Icarian 7's southern range, vanished in a column of white light. Not burned, not cratered, erased. Sensors recorded no radiation, no fallout. Just nothing. The noble bloodline of Tuverin, a family that had ruled for 4 centuries, ended in less than a minute. No civilian casualties. No collateral damage. Just justice. The Concorde was paralyzed. By the time a task force mobilized, Earth's fleet was gone, slipped back into subspace like shadows into fog. They didn't conquer. They didn't claim territory. They left no message behind, just absence and the echo of precision. And the image. That image. It began to appear in places it shouldn't. On traffic beacons, on communication hubs, on navigation charts. A boy, not crying, but bleeding. The red wasn't animated. It didn't drip. It just was. Still. Haunting. Unmoving. The High Council met in emergency session. Accusations flew. Some claimed Earth had overreacted. Others insisted it was stage. But none denied the truth. Earth had acted with clarity, with efficiency, and with terrifying control. The Valkyrie called it cowardice. They prepared a counteroffensive. They broadcast threats of retaliation. Then their military databases blinked out for 11 minutes. No one spoke of what happened during those 11 minutes, because afterward, the threats stopped. Earth hadn't declared war. Earth hadn't raised its flag. But the message was clear. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't even about vengeance. They had made a child of Earth cry blood. And Earth had answered, not with fury, but with purpose. The stars held their breath. In the days that followed the strike on Icarian 7, fear didn't come from the blast. It came from the silence that followed. The Concorde was used to retaliation, to uprisings, to loud declarations of war. But Earth offered none of that. No broadcasts, no press conferences, no ultimatums. Instead, systems began to break. On the merchant planet of Ulveris, all trade shipments bound for Valkyrie space vanished from transport logs. The planetary governor demanded answers. The human trade guilds replied with only one sentence. You laughed when he bled. On Station Theta 9, a Valkyrie listening post monitoring human communications experienced a 12-second blackout. When it came back online, every screen displayed the same image. The boy with bloodied eyes, standing unbroken. By the end of the week, 9 more Valkyrie military systems reported similar intrusions. None of Earth's fleets were visible, but they were everywhere. The Valkyrie High Warlord, angered and humiliated, issued a declaration of strength. He broadcast a message across the Concord, boasting of retaliation. He promised to erase Earth's colonies, to make examples of their so-called bravery. As he spoke, his ship's lights flickered. Then his personal data core, his hidden logs, encrypted dossiers, and classified files, leaked across the Concord network in real time. Everyone saw them. His crimes, his secret arms deals, the civilian casualties from training exercises, the torture orders, centuries of suppressed war crimes broadcast at once. The warlord went silent. So did his fleet. Meanwhile, the Valkyrie command structure began to collapse from within. Communication hubs failed in sync, security networks turned against their users, and military codes once thought uncrackable were suddenly public knowledge. Officers reported their private files accessed, then rewritten to include a new signature line. We do not forget. No one had seen a human ship since the strike. But Earth was there. Everywhere. The Concord Council met again, this time behind closed doors. Their data systems, long thought immune to intrusion, flickered during the session. One delegate whispered nervously, "They're watching." "They can't be," another snapped. "We'd know." The lights dimmed. For 3 seconds, every screen in the chamber went black. Then a child's voice played. Not loud, not threatening, just calm. "You shouldn't have done that." Panic spread not through civilians, but through leaders, the ones who understood what this meant. The Valkyrie, once the enforcers of fear, now struggled to hold rank. Their soldiers hesitated. Their officers stopped speaking in public. Their allies grew quiet. In the shadows, Earth moved, not with chaos, but with control. And the galaxy, which once mocked humanity's softness, now faced the cold truth of its resolve. They had mistaken patience for weakness. And now, even the mighty began to tremble. Because Earth had not declared war. They had simply remembered. They called it the Blooded Boy. No one knew who named it first. Maybe it was whispered in the dark corners of mining colonies. Maybe it started in the encrypted chats of frightened soldiers. Maybe it was just born naturally, the way all legends are, quietly, irresistibly, and everywhere at once. But across the galaxy, the image of a child with blood streaming from his eyes became more than a symbol. It became a warning. Merchants carried holos of the boy in their pockets, tucking them under control panels like charms. Entire battalions of non-human troops refused orders to enter human space. The story grew with every telling, that he was the son of an Earth general, or maybe a god, or maybe both. That he was still alive, or maybe he wasn't. And now Earth's rage had no limit. That if you harmed a human child, your stars would go dark. The High Council tried to stamp out the story. They labeled it propaganda. False. Manipulated. An exaggeration. They flooded the networks with counterfeeds, friendly narratives, smiling Valkyrie diplomats shaking hands with human officials. No one cared. Every attempt to erase the image only made it more powerful. Every denial deepened belief. And still, Earth said nothing. They didn't need to. In the neutral system of Juran's Hollow, a Concord cruiser attempted to reroute a human convoy. Standard procedure. Routine inspection. The convoy stopped, powered down as ordered, and then deployed 3 orbital drones. Silent, sleek, unarmed, but broadcasting one image. The boy. Blooded. Staring. The cruiser backed off without a scan. In the nebula ports of Kareth Prime, human traders set up a new route. No permission. No discussion. The local authorities prepared to protest, but their systems froze. For 2 minutes, their entire infrastructure played one loop. A quiet voice, untraceable, saying, he was 10. They allowed the trade route. In backroom meetings and deep archives, whispers spread among the Concord's oldest species, whispers of the First War of Soul, long buried and unspoken, of humanity's early rise, their extinction wars, the planet they once burned themselves to save, of how they chose peace, not because they were weak, but because they knew exactly what they could do, and had chosen not to. Until now. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was awe. A quiet, uncertain awe that rattled the foundations of every empire. Because Earth had shown what it could do without a single declaration, without occupying a single planet, without raising its flag, with only memory. They hadn't spoken. And yet their voice shook the stars. The legend was no longer a warning. It was a promise. The message came without fanfare. No ships, no banners, no grand arrival. It arrived through a back-channel comm node buried deep within the Concord's diplomatic archives, one so old it hadn't been used in generations. The file name was simple: response. It bypassed encryption. It ignored firewalls. It opened itself. The High Council gathered in the Grand Spire, expecting another threat, another statement of vengeance. What they got was a video. A single, unedited recording. Liam Wren sat in a hospital bed. There were monitors behind him, gently pulsing. He looked smaller than the legend, younger than the myth. His face still bore the faint marks of the strike, and a small patch covered the side of his head where it had been bandaged. He didn't speak for the first few seconds, just stared into the lens. Then, in a soft, clear voice, he said, I didn't cry because it hurt. I cried because I wasn't allowed to stand. The council chamber was dead silent. Liam continued, he hit me, and everyone looked away. Not because they were afraid of him, but because they didn't think it mattered. He blinked slowly, calm, measured. But it mattered to me. And it mattered to Earth. The camera zoomed slightly, just enough to show the steel in his eyes. Eyes too old now for a 10-year-old boy. You don't get to hurt us and call it balance. You don't get to strike the small and think we'll stay quiet. My mom told me once, humans don't start fights. He paused. But we remember. The video ended. There was no flag behind him, no generals beside him, no anthem played. Just a boy, reminding the galaxy that Earth had eyes. The Concorde scrambled to contain the transmission. But they couldn't. It was already too late. The file had jumped from relay to relay, piggybacking on every open diplomatic channel. It was in freighter nav systems, embedded in shuttle diagnostics, even hidden in advertisements on civilian networks. Everyone saw it. And in that moment, the story changed again. Liam Wren was no longer just the blooded boy. He was the voice of Earth. And Earth had spoken, not through warheads or invasions, but through clarity, through a child who refused to kneel, and a people who refused to forget. The Valkyrie attempted to release their own message, a denial, a carefully staged press event with clean uniforms and forced smiles. No one watched it. Instead, they played Liam's message on loop in bars, in academies, on the sides of cargo haulers drifting through trade lanes. The message had no commands, no demands, no threats, only truth. And across the galaxy, people, human and non-human alike, began to look at Earth with new eyes. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as something far more dangerous. As rememberers. The boy's words echoed long after the video ended. Worlds once untouched by conflict began to shift. Independent colonies, long silenced under Concorde rule, played Liam's message in open defiance. Streets filled not with weapons, but with images, hand-drawn, digital, holographic, of the blooded boy who did not break. And Earth. Earth never sent another fleet. They didn't need to. The galaxy moved around them now. Concord patrols no longer scanned human ships. Border inspections became ceremonial. Valkyrie war vessels gave wide berth to any Earth convoy, even unarmed ones. Merchants changed their routes to avoid accidents, just in case. And quietly, one by one, the old powers began to change their tone. Apologies were issued, not in words, but in gestures. Entire colonies where humans had been marginalized were returned to Terran control without negotiation. Historical wrongs were reviewed and amended. The Concord passed new legislation ensuring the protection of all children, across species. Not because they believed it, but because they remembered. The image of Liam Wren hung in halls where laws were made and wars were planned. A silent guardian. A bloody-faced reminder of what happens when Earth is wounded. Because that was what changed everything. Not Earth's strength, not their ships, not their stealth, but the truth that their greatest fury was never born from ambition. It was born from care. And nothing in the galaxy is more dangerous than a species that cares deeply and strikes only when pushed too far. Decades later, scholars would debate the turning point. Some said it was the moment the fleet appeared over Icarian 7. Others believed it was when the Concord's data systems failed, or when the warlord was publicly exposed. But those who lived through it knew better. It was when a 10-year-old child, hurt and unarmed, stood before the galaxy and did not look away. When a people who had been mocked for their empathy, dismissed for their kindness, showed what it meant when their patience ended. Humanity returned to the stars. Not as conquerors, not as avengers, but as something far more enduring. As witnesses, they did not rage across the galaxy. They did not shatter the Concord or demand tribute. They moved forward, quietly, steadily, their influence spreading not through war, but through memory. And the Concord learned a truth no empire wants to face. Fear may keep an empire standing, but memory decides if it ever rises again. Now, every time a child cries on a distant colony, every time a voice goes unheard, every time someone dares to say, "It doesn't matter," they pause. Because somewhere, watching from the quiet blue cradle of Earth, are the ones who remember. And they do not forget. Ever.